Hunter Biden thought he had the upper hand with a joke, until Barron Trump took the mic and left everyone speechless. The ballroom at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel was a sight to behold that evening. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a golden glow over the elegantly dressed guests milling about, glasses of champagne in hand. The annual charity gala was in full swing, a gathering of the nation's elite, from politicians and business moguls to celebrities and media icons. Conversations buzzed across the room, blending with the soft strains of a live orchestra playing in the corner. Among the attendees was a figure who had become somewhat of a wild card in the public eye, Hunter Biden. Dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, he was already drawing attention, not for his outfit, but for his animated conversations and his tendency to command the room with an unmistakable energy. Some chuckled, others exchanged side glances, but most were used to Hunter's antics. This wasn't his first gala after all, and his reputation preceded him. Across the room stood Barron Trump, the youngest member of the Trump family. At just 18, Barron had grown into an imposing figure, both in stature and composure. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, he exuded a calm demeanor, quietly observing the bustling crowd. Despite the occasional whispers about his presence, he stayed out of the spotlight, conversing politely with a few guests who approached him. The event's program was moving along smoothly. Silent auctions, heartfelt speeches, and musical performances peppered the evening. Yet as the MC announced an impromptu lighthearted segment where select guests could share jokes and anecdotes, a ripple of excitement and trepidation spread through the crowd. It was a tradition meant to break the ice and lighten the atmosphere, but in a room filled with larger-than-life personalities, it always carried the risk of unexpected drama. Hunter Biden took the microphone first. With his signature smirk and confident stride, he made his way to the stage, the spotlight following him. A few scattered cheers erupted, mingled with hesitant applause. Hunter was known for his sharp tongue, and tonight, he seemed particularly eager to entertain. But as the microphone crackled in his hand and he began speaking, there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. People leaned in, curious and cautious, wondering where he'd direct his humor. And just like that, the evening took a turn no one could have anticipated. Hunter started strong, cracking a few harmless jokes about the absurdities of high society and the extravagance of the event. The room chuckled, the kind of polite laughter you'd expect at a formal affair. But soon, his tone shifted, taking on a sharper edge. He leaned into the microphone, his voice carrying a mischievous lilt. "You know," he began, his eyes scanning the crowd, "it's not every day you get to share a room with such, towering legacies." The audience tensed, unsure of where this was going. Take young Barron Trump over there, for instance. Heads turned. All eyes were suddenly on Barron, who stood quietly near a table at the back of the room. His expression didn't waver, but the spotlight Hunter had just shone on him was unmistakable. "Kid's got it all, doesn't he?" Hunter continued, a faint smirk playing on his lips. "Tall, handsome, born into one of the most famous families in the world. But I've always wondered—" He paused, drawing out the suspense. "What's it like to grow up with a name bigger than your personality?" A hushed silence fell over the room. The joke had landed, but not in the way Hunter might have intended. The audience froze, unsure of whether to laugh or recoil. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others focused intently on Barron, waiting for his reaction. Barron, however, didn't flinch. He remained rooted in place, his face a mask of calm. But the tension in the room was electric, as if the collective air had been sucked out. Hunter, sensing the discomfort, tried to laugh it off. "Come on, folks, it's all in good fun," he said, raising his glass in mock cheer. But the crowd wasn't laughing. If anything, the room had turned colder. And then Barron moved. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward, making his way through the throng of guests with an air of unshakable confidence. The crowd parted for him instinctively, creating a path toward the stage. It was as if the entire gala was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. Barron's strides were measured, his posture impeccable, his expression unreadable. The room seemed frozen in time, every gaze fixed on him. For a teenager, his presence was commanding, almost unnerving. Guests whispered to one another, their murmurs carrying a mix of curiosity and unease. Hunter, still clutching the microphone, watched Barron's approach with an amused grin, clearly expecting to maintain the upper hand. "Well, this is unexpected," Hunter quipped, his voice laced with feigned charm. "The young Trump himself graces us with a response." As Barron reached the front of the room, he didn't immediately grab the microphone. Instead, he took a moment to stand there, his tall frame silhouetted against the stage lights. The silence was almost deafening. Finally, Barron extended his hand, and Hunter, perhaps more flustered than he let on, handed him the microphone. The room collectively held its breath as Barron stepped onto the stage. His gaze swept across the audience. Not hurried, not hesitant, just calm and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, smooth, and surprisingly deep for his age. "First of all," he began, "thank you, Mr. Biden, for your generous words." The audience chuckled softly, appreciating the subtle sarcasm in his tone. He continued, "It's funny you mention legacies and personalities, because I've always believed that a legacy is what you leave behind when people forget your name. It's about how you treat others, how you carry yourself, and whether you can look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, 'I did something good.'" The words hung in the air, profound and precise. Hunter's grin faltered slightly, his bravado visibly waning. Barron turned to him, his expression calm but piercing. "And if there's one thing my parents taught me, it's that your actions speak louder than anything else. So maybe instead of trying to make people laugh at someone else's expense, we should focus on lifting people up." A ripple of applause broke out, hesitant at first, but it quickly gained momentum. The room was alive now, the tension replaced with something else: admiration, respect, even awe. Barron's composure was magnetic, and the crowd couldn't help but respond. Hunter shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard. Barron, however, wasn't done. "This gala," he said, his voice firm but polite, "is about raising money for causes that matter. It's not about who can tell the best joke or grab the most attention. So let's refocus on what's important, shall we?" The applause erupted again, louder this time, and Barron handed the microphone back to Hunter with a slight nod. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked off the stage, his posture straight and his confidence unwavering. The shift in the room was palpable. Barron had completely turned the tables. As Barron made his way back to his table, the room buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the earlier awkward silence. Guests exchanged looks of astonishment, and quiet murmurs quickly turned into audible conversations. The young man had not only held his own, but had managed to articulate a lesson in grace and respect that resonated deeply with the audience. For many in the room, Barron Trump had been something of an enigma, seen but rarely heard. Yet tonight, he shattered expectations. The quiet teenager who had always been overshadowed by his family's towering reputation had emerged as a voice of reason and maturity. At the back of the room, a group of journalists whispered furiously, scribbling notes and shooting glances at Barron. Cameras that had previously been focused on the stage now turned toward his table, capturing his composed demeanor as he sat back down, calmly sipping from his glass of sparkling water. Hunter, still standing on stage, attempted to recover. "Well, folks," he said with a forced chuckle, "I guess I've been put in my place." The joke landed awkwardly, met with a few polite laughs but mostly silence. It was clear that the crowd's allegiance had shifted. Seated near the front, an older woman in an emerald gown leaned toward her companion. "He didn't just respond," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "He taught us all a lesson." The gala continued, but it was impossible to ignore the change in atmosphere. The guests were no longer focused on the glitz and glamour. Conversations turned to Barron's words, dissecting his poised response and the wisdom he displayed. Meanwhile, Hunter slipped off the stage, heading for the bar, his earlier confidence noticeably diminished. Barron, on the other hand, remained unfazed. He listened intently to the ongoing speeches, occasionally nodding politely at those who approached his table to congratulate him. One of the evening's organizers, a prominent philanthropist, approached Barron with a smile. "Young man," she said warmly, You have a gift for turning a moment into something meaningful. Thank you for reminding us why we're here tonight." Barron smiled faintly, his response simple and humble. "I just said what felt right." But the guests knew it was more than that. He had changed the tone of the entire evening. By the time dessert was served, the story of what had just transpired had already begun to spread beyond the walls of the ballroom. Guests were texting friends, sharing snippets of Barron's speech, and debating how someone so young could deliver such a profound and composed response. Social media posts began to trickle in, with hashtags like #BarronTrump trending within hours. In one corner of the room, a well-known columnist for a major news outlet was typing furiously on her phone. "This isn't just a Gala story," she murmured to a colleague seated beside her. "This is a generational moment. The youngest Trump just put everyone on notice." The night's MC returned to the stage, attempting to bring the focus back to the evening's charitable cause. But it was clear the energy in the room had shifted. Barron's response had become the highlight, overshadowing even the high-profile auction items and the grand announcements of million-dollar donations. A few tables away, Hunter Biden sat quietly, his usual jovial demeanor subdued. He seemed more reflective now, swirling the remains of his drink and avoiding the glances of those who might be gauging his reaction. Whether he felt regret or simply surprise, it was hard to say. As the evening wound down, Barron remained at his table, engaging in calm, measured conversations with those who approached him. Some congratulated him for his poise, while others simply wanted to shake his hand, impressed by the strength of his character. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, a well-dressed couple whispered animatedly. "He's got a point," one of them said, gesturing subtly toward Barron. "What are we doing with our platforms if not lifting others up? That kid just schooled all of us." By the time the last guests were gathering their coats, Barron's moment had become the defining memory of the night. It wasn't the glittering chandeliers, the celebrity sightings, or even the astronomical amounts raised for charity. It was the teenager who had turned a potentially humiliating moment into a profound message about dignity and respect. As Barron and his security detail made their way toward the exit, a young man approached him, visibly nervous. "I just wanted to say," he began, stumbling over his words. "You've really inspired me tonight. Thank you." Barron paused for a moment, then extended his hand for a firm shake. "I'm glad," he said simply. "We're all capable of making an impact. Just start small and keep moving forward." With those words, Barron left the gala, leaving behind not just a memory but a challenge for everyone to reflect on. By the next morning, the events of the gala had become a national talking point. News outlets replayed clips of Barron's poised response, and headlines across media platforms praised his maturity and grace under pressure. Commentators debated what this moment meant, not just for the Trump family, but for the younger generation as a whole. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions. Some users admired Barron's ability to remain composed in the face of public scrutiny, calling him a role model for youth. Others pointed out the broader lesson in his words, emphasizing how respect and kindness should never be compromised, even in the spotlight. One viral tweet read, "Last night, a 18-year-old showed us all what leadership looks like. It's not about power or privilege, it's about character. Bravo, Barron Trump." Even those who had previously been critical of the Trump family couldn't help but acknowledge the grace with which Barron handled the situation. Meanwhile, Hunter Biden stayed silent on the matter, his team issuing no comments to the press. The impact of the night stretched beyond the news cycle. At the foundation hosting the gala, donations surged unexpectedly the next day, many accompanied by notes citing Barron's words as the inspiration. The organizers quickly realized that his speech had not only salvaged the evening, but elevated its purpose, reminding everyone of the true meaning behind their efforts. In the weeks that followed, Barron's actions became a rallying point in discussions about the importance of character in leadership. Schools and youth organizations even began using clips from his response to teach lessons about respect, composure, and using your voice for good. But for Barron, life continued as usual. When asked about the moment by a journalist weeks later, he simply shrugged. "I didn't say anything special," he replied humbly. "I just spoke what I believe." And that's where the true lesson lies. It wasn't about making headlines or creating a viral moment. It was about standing firm in your values, no matter who's watching. Barron's words remind us all that character isn't built in the big moments. It's revealed there. If you took something meaningful from this story, take a moment to reflect on your own actions. How can you lift someone up today? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that challenge us to think, grow, and live better.